Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Time Extend. My name is Adam Ismail, and where's my partner in crime today? Brendan, what's up?
Much at all, Adam. Not much at all, except from being super hyped that we've got another guest cast lined up. We have the amazing, incredible Time Extend fan, and more importantly, Sega Rally Revo developer, Paul Lovell.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going, Paul? Time Extend fan is you don't want to lead with that. He's done so many more interesting things.
How you doing, guys? Thank you very much for having me on the show. It's brilliant to be here.
Yeah, we're so glad to have you on and to give you the proper introduction that you deserve. I mean, right now, you are a game designer working on the F1 franchise at Codemasters, correct?
Right, yeah. So we just shipped 2019 last year. So that's, still there now. It's very cool. It's going really well. Working up updates to that game and stuff at the moment. So it's, very cool.
Yeah, and F1 is awesome, but you've been in this business for a long time. Because I was taking a look at your resume and go all the way back to the Colin McRae days on the Xbox PS2 generation, Dirt, Sega Rally, which we're obviously going to talk about a lot today. Micro Machines, MotorStorm. Yeah, you've done it all. Yeah,
been around a lot. Yeah, about 20 years now, or coming up, and almost all racing games as well. So yes.
Yeah, you definitely have a type. Yeah. Yeah, and Brendan, it's all franchises I feel like that you particularly love, because something that I don't know if we ever mentioned on the show, but the way that Time Extend started was Brendan and I teamed up on a Micro Machines World Tour review for GT Planet, and we ended up chatting about it. We did the multiplayer, and then we ended up chatting about racing games, and we're just like, oh, we love the same games and stuff, and immediately we're like, we have to start a podcast. So yeah, we owe a lot to the Micro Machines team.
That's good to know.
Yeah, we're so stoked to have you on. I mean, it's like the perfect Time Extend guest, I think, and have to thank you too, because we recently started the Discord, and we've got a lot of people in Discord. I'm sure a lot of what you're listening right now, and it's so exciting to get everybody together in the same room to talk about this stuff. But it's also so great that, like, anytime anyone asks a question, like, I wonder why they did that in Sega Rally Revo, you're like, this is why we did it, and you explain everything.
Yeah, it's cool. It's great talking to people that, it's nice having a sort of path in to actually get an answer from things sometimes. And obviously, some stuff I couldn't tell you, but yeah, a lot of the time it's just, like you say, we did it because of this reason, and so it's cool.
Definitely, and I think I guess that's the funny part about the Time Extend Discord at the moment, and then the Twitter account as well, because there's quite a mix of people who are actually working in industry and fans, and of course, as the recent controversial racing opinion tweet has shown, people can come out with some ridiculous stuff, and it's been exposed to the racing game developers and designers themselves. I guess it's interesting seeing how some people perceive things.
That's right. Yeah, that was a fun Friday evening. That was watching that explode on Twitter.
It's still exploding. I'm still getting the notifications.
It was amazing.
It's always great too when you see the controversial opinions from people who are actually working in the industry.
Right.
It's like, wow. All right. Yeah. So it's definitely been a fun 48 hours in Planet Time Extend, because we've Brendan put out that tweet and just, oh my god, the reactions are crazy. But we're gonna do an episode down the line. I mean, that'll probably be the next thing we do, just reacting to our favorite tweets, because there's some great takes in there, and there are some takes where I'm just scratching my head, like, yeah, really, okay. But that's what happens when you pull the internet for these things, right?
Absolutely.
All right.
Exactly.
So yeah, I guess we'll get into the portion of the show that's focusing on you, Paul. Seems like a good place to start would be, the beginning of your career and how you got your start in this industry, and kind of what drew you to, working on racing games.
So originally, I had no background in games before Codemasters. I was actually working in IT for a car manufacturer, and unfortunately got made redundant. It was one of those last in, first out type of deals. So I was off to the job agencies the next day, and the job came up at Codemasters. I think it was like a 3-week contract, basically working on clearing up PCs, taking them apart, that sort of stuff, with the chance of it extending. So like, cool, I'll go for that, perfect opportunity to try and get into video games, because at the same time, I'd also made friends with a couple of guys on an import gaming forum. I don't know if Brendan, you'd have heard of it. It's called Next Gen. It was a long time. I don't think they're around anymore, but it was.
Oh yeah.
In the days of when.
Right,
down in Farnborough in London, it was basically the days of obviously having to import Japanese and US games because the PAL territory was often very much delayed in getting stuff. So I made a few friends on there, and we started playing Fantasy Star Online together. And turned out a couple of them worked at Codemasters as level designers on McRae.
Wow.
So when I went there, it was obviously nice having someone who you knew as soon as I started there. And then one day he goes to me, there's a level design position coming up on the team. Are you interested? I was like, yeah, definitely, hook me up, So get me, So I spoke to applied for the position, and I did a test, and I got the job, and the rest from that was history, really. There's no prior knowledge. I didn't go to university and get a degree or anything in design. It was just one of those things. I guess I got lucky a little bit with that.
Wow.
So that was that. Yeah, and that was straight into mid-development of McRae 3 on PS2, and Xbox and PC. So it was cool. Thrown in right in the deep end. Basically, designed some tracks for Finland, and it was off I went.
Oh, so you're the reason that I could never get past that rally. Okay. I got it. That's really cool. So I imagine before then, having worked in auto manufacturer and your first job in game design, being Colin McRae, you were a fan of the series and stuff. You were playing this stuff beforehand, and you were very invested in it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as a kid, it was going to like the fair or arcades where they had like Outrun or Space Harrier or Afterburner. It was amazing, these video games you could play, and then obviously with a Mega Drive you could play pretty good versions of those games at home. And I always was a Sega fan, and then that one day I remember on a summer holiday going to an arcade and saw Virtua Racing, and it was like absolutely mind-blowing, so. And from there it went on. It was like Virtua Racing, Ridge Racer, Daytona, Sega Rally, obviously. And so always a racing game fan. And I remember using to watch motorsport with my dad, watching the Lombard RAC Rally and watching Formula One and stuff. And my uncle actually had a Lancia Delta, an 8-valve, which was crazy, amazing. Yeah, back in the day, I remember zipping around country lanes and that thing at ridiculous speed. Which was cool, yeah. So, and he was obviously well into his rallying. So, yeah, it was a dream come true to work for Codemasters on that project. It really was. It was brilliant.
That is so cool. Colin McRae 3 was the first one in the series I ever played, and I think I must have been 9 or 10 years old. And never heard of it before. Didn't know who Colin McRae was. I had an understanding of Rally, but that was from playing like Sega Rally and stuff like that. And that game was. That game was phenomenal. I mean, it was one of those like generational leaps. It felt like it anyway. Yeah. Just like I just remember just being blown away by the graphics. I'd also never played a racing game that was that felt that real before, and that was that punishing, especially with the damage.
Oh yeah, it was crazy, yeah. And Sega Rally was, of course, the influence originally for the original Colin McRae. The guys that made that were big fans of the original game, and that's kind of where that came from. So it's kind of full circle, really, in some ways.
Yeah. How was it just being at Codemasters? I know it was early days. I know you were probably just getting your feet wet in the beginning, but I think that's a time that a lot of fans of the Colin McRae and Dirt franchises look back on as like that was a heyday, because in the span of 3 or 4 years, you had these games that just like there were more or less annual releases, but they always improved in measurable and known ways above the last one. It just seemed like Codemasters was going from strength to strength. You had the Toka series too, so like, what was the environment there like?
It was brilliant. It was just really exciting. I remember finishing up Rally 3, and the guys were right. We're doing Rally 4, and it's out in 12 months. Go basically, and we all stuck to the same environments pretty much. I know I did all of Finland that time, and it was really exciting because we had a really tight little team, and we just spend all day perfecting these tracks, or trying to make them as fun as possible, and it was brilliant. It was just you go in every day to work, and the game would get better and better every single day. It was cool. And yeah, the Tokka team, they were downstairs at the time, and they were obviously on an annual franchise too, and it was a brilliant time. The coders then, it was cool.
Yeah, how'd it work with just because you said you were working on Finland for a couple of those games? Was it like, one level designer kind of had their rally, I guess you could say, their environment? Was there that kind of focus, or how was it sort of split up?
With Rally 3, I think it's a long time ago now. There were 2 people per environment, and then when we moved on to 4, Colin McRae 4, it was just 1 person per environment pretty much. And then some of the stages here and there, someone might help out on, but generally it was you had an environment each, and then you had an artist for that environment. So the level designer would build the ribbon for the track layout completely, and place all the objects like the trees and the buildings and all that sort of stuff. But the artist would make all those assets. So it was really cool. Really really close in that team with working with artists on that. But yeah, from what I remember, it was pretty much one designer per environment.
Wow. That's really cool. Yeah, that's the kind of insight that never would have gotten, how those responsibilities are split up and whatnot. Yeah, so
it's much different now. Sorry, yeah, go on.
Oh no, sorry.
No, and I'm saying that later on, obviously, when the games got more complicated, moving to the next generation, the games got way more complicated. So there's a lot more artists on those teams. But the level design team, for the first Dirt at least, stayed pretty small. I think it was the same sort of size actually. But the art team obviously ballooned massively because of what the requirements for PS3 and 360.
Right, and oh my god, the first Dirt just. What was it? It wasn't called the Ego Engine at that time, right? It went by a different name. I believe. Neon, or am I making that up?
I think it was. I think that was the first one with Ego, but I can't remember. It's such a long time ago now.
Right. But whatever
I want to say it was, but maybe not.
Whatever that engine was, I mean, those games Dirt was another franchise, and when it started, just blew me away. I mean, visually, you had first-party racing games on those systems that did not look as good as what Codemasters was putting out then. Yeah,
it was cool. And then after that, they went on to Grid, which obviously, again, that first Grid game, it was incredible. So,
yeah. I think that the first Grid game really kind of upped the ante for what people were hoping for that gen in terms of arcade racers, because it just the atmosphere was incredible, because the first Dirt game has an amazing atmosphere as well, obviously. The kind of the nice gritty look was fantastic, but Grid, as we talked about in our Grid casts, it just had that level of excitement that you would expect to see in a real kind of race event, paired up with the kind of underdog go-getter going up against Raven West and that type of thing. It was the original Grid's pretty much even a masterpiece now, I would say.
Yeah, there's obviously something special about that series, and especially that first game. We talked about a lot in that one podcast, and it almost I mean we've talked about, but there were other games that were kind of trying to do that, like Need for Speed Shift felt like it was going for a similar vibe, but I don't know, Grid all the pieces were put together so well, and yeah, so that's such an awesome time to be at Codemasters, but being the Sega fan that you are, you couldn't be pulled away, I'm sure, from the lure of Sega Racing Studio. So how'd you end up there?
Guy Wilday, who set the studio up, he was originally on the McRae team, so quite a few people knew him. So when he set the Sega team up, obviously quite a few people would move from Codemasters initially to work on what became Sega Rally. And so obviously I was very eager to start there as soon as possible, but obviously that took a number of years, because the game was built from nothing. They didn't use an engine that was pre-existing or anything. It was written from zero code one day, and up until a complete racing game. So that took a while. So when the opportunity came up, I snapped the hand off, basically.
Yeah, so did you kind of jump in midway through the project, or because I saw it said I think you started working on in 2006, right? But that was like only a year before the game released.
Right, yeah. So it was quite late on. At that point, the game, all the technical stuff was up, and the game was up and running. It was just lacking tracks at that time. So I went in as a level and sort of level stroke game designer on that team, and basically my first task was working on Alpine 1, which was pretty much in a pretty good state, but it needed just a few final tweaks, and then it was like, right, I think the first track of every environment was in a pretty good state. Tropical 1 was the one that was the most complete, because that was what was used for like the vertical slice for the game when they showed it to people.
Yeah, it was in the demo, I think.
Right, that's right, it was in the demo as well. Yeah.
If I remember correctly, the demo was Tropical 1, Alpine 3. Sorry.
No, that's cool, yeah. God, you've got a good memory. I didn't remember that.
Well, because it was a really good collection. I think there was a canyon in there too. It was the one that was similar to the one from Sega Rally 3.
Right, with the
dam.
jets that go over. I remember now, yeah.
Right. And that was a great slice, because those are some of the most memorable tracks in that game. And I guess there was a reason why they were also chosen, because something, we're kind of moving forward in like the questions I wanted to ask, but something that always intrigued me was like the slight differences between tracks in Sega Rally Revo and 3, because it's almost like there's segments of them that are taken from different tracks, right? And I imagine that's just because you only have 3 tracks in the arcade game, so you want to just take the best of, and you also want to tune it to the difficulty level.
Yeah, so I was thinking about this obviously over the last few days, and so initially we were going to make 3 brand new tracks for Sega Rally 3. The same environments, but they were completely brand new. And then sort of during development of those, we decided, I can't remember the reason now, it may have been time to be honest, we decided, well, we'll pick the best 3 tracks from those environments that exist in the game now, and we'll add like another alternate route onto them to sort of add a new twist onto those. So that's basically what we did. So when you play Alpine 1, you can see the sort of the little junctions going off. And they were never, they were never intended to be like another content or anything, but they were just quite, when we played them, they were like perfect opportunity to, let's make a little route up here. And sort of Alpine 1, you went up, didn't you? You saw like the slalom track and stuff, the bobsleigh, wasn't it? That sort of stuff. Yeah, so yes, that worked out really well. Those tracks were cool.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. I think I remember when I would play Alpine 1 on the kind of when I first got it on PS3, and then I had the chance to play Sega Rally 3 as well, and I had kind of connected a line that clearly wasn't there then, that the kind of the track in Sega Rally 3 was always planned, because even though like I was playing the absolute crap out of that game, I did notice that little junction, and then when I played Sega Rally 3 and seen that there's a track up that way, I was like, oh my god, that's so cool. So it's interesting to hear that the tracks in the Revo were just designed so well that you could actually build on top of them if required. It's almost like a mini open world in some capacity, you could say.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I think the philosophy of that was when you play games like Daytona and you see like Dinosaur Canyon, there's a couple of little areas on that track where there's junctions going off.
Yep.
Or you play, so it was like that. It was like, oh, that's cool. It makes it feel like a more bigger, fuller world, which was, and obviously, I'm glad you say that, because obviously it worked. The illusion worked.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of my favorite things about Ridge Racer 5, is because it's a game that really took that to the next level, because, you just had that 1 or 2 Ridge Racer tracks from the first couple games, and then 5, they're like, well, what if every other road actually led to another track? And it was, I don't know that anyone who started with Ridge Racer 5 really noticed that, but if you were a longtime fan, it was so cool to see.
It was absolutely amazing. That was, I think I'm possibly my favorite Ridge Racer, but that's definitely for another conversation. But I think mainly because I had a Japanese PS2, and playing that game was mind-blowing at the time because of what they were doing with it. And like you say, the tracks were cool. It was brilliant.
Yeah, it's a good way to, I imagine, to save assets and reuse some content, but also create something new. I feel like it's something that, and then also if you're really into those games and you're a fan, it's something that you always kind of wonder, especially when you're a kid and you have an imagination and you're just like, where does that road go? And then before you know it, you're drawing maps of other alternate routes in Dinosaur Canyon, and
that's right.
Yeah. Very, very cool. So yeah, I just find Sega Racing Studio is such a great but also tragic existence. It's very interesting to me because you kind of, at least from what I remember reading about in press releases and stuff like that at the time, you had the studio Sega put together to really honor its old IP. But the thing is that obviously most, if not all, the people who were working there didn't, work on those original games. So, I imagine it was a great honor to be working on those things. But also, like, was there any sense of pressure, or just like a lot of deliberation about like, how do we do this right? How do we kind of advance the genre, but also like stay true to the core tenets of Sega Rally or Daytona or what have you? What was the attitude like?
I mean, that was before I started there. I sorted all that sort of stuff out. But the philosophy for the whole studio was really take classic Sega racing IP and make it appropriate for a sort of more modern Western world. So we'd have the career mode, and we'll have like the online multiplayer and the time, the sort of the online leaderboards for time attack and that sort of stuff, whilst keeping it feeling like a classic Sega game. The blue skies and the vivid colors and the sort of the big drifting and the really loose camera, that sort of stuff. But yeah, I wasn't really part of it at the studio at that time. So, but that was the philosophy for the studio.
Yeah, and I also find it interesting because Sega Rally Revo came out. Well, actually, when you all talk about it, do you call it Sega Rally Revo or do you call it Sega Rally?
Yeah, because the Revo was the American, and Japan actually, but yeah, for Europe it was just called Sega Rally. So yeah, it was. Yeah, and then they added the Revo for the US audience. Yeah, I normally call it Revo these days, just so people know what you're talking about.
Right. Otherwise, people think you're talking about 1995.
I'm 95. Yeah.
Yeah. I found it interesting they didn't just call it Sega Rally 3 everywhere. I felt like that would have been a bigger. I don't know. That just would have been a more forceful, like, wow, this is 3. Like.
Yeah, I guess because it was a new team making it and a kind of new direction. Maybe they sort of wanted to restart it. Kind of like, I guess, I was thinking about this the other day, maybe like how the new Doom that came out a few years ago, it was just called Doom. It wasn't like Doom 5 or whatever. So it was like a new take on the game. So I guess I assume the philosophy was the same sort of thing for that.
Yeah. And we also have to like remember, there was a whole other team that put out a Sega Rally game a year earlier that never made it outside of Asia. So, and that was 2006.
Right, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that was cool. I played that quite a bit. It was good.
Yeah.
With the language, but it was good.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that game because I have that game. I keep going back to it. I have a really hard time with it because it's very difficult, and also it's obviously difficult to navigate if you're not a Japanese speaker. So, yeah, have you spent a lot of time with it?
I spent a bit of time with it, and I really like the car upgrades and stuff like that in it. But to be honest, I played more of the 95 disc that came with it, which is just a phenomenal version of. It was like an arcade perfect version of 95, wasn't it? So I did, to be honest, play more of that version. But it was cool.
Yeah, that version, it's literally just the 95 ROM that they just put onto a CD. It's not even a DVD. They just put it onto like a CD-ROM and then play on the PS2. It's pretty great. It's perfect.
Yeah, that's cool. And it was odd that the Sega Rally 2006 never came out outside of Japan. That was odd.
Yeah, I don't know what that was about. I thought, it's interesting because I feel like that game was a more... It felt like sort of this natural evolution between like maybe Sega Rally 2 and trying to go for... Because it did have like stages in the career mode. There was the arcade mode that had, I think, more of like the laps, but there was the circuit style. And then there was a career mode that had like the hard stages. And that was trying to sort of maybe bridge a gap to like a more real, not really realistic, but like something more along the lines of a Colin McRae. Whereas like Revo felt like more of like a back to basics, like, we're going to do the pure arcade gameplay style better.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It's odd. It's odd that they made that game and just kind of vanished. No one was really talking about it either at the time. It was strange. Maybe they were just testing the water with a brand name or something. Don't know.
Yeah, Sega was going through a lot of changes in the early part of 2000s, so it's not surprising they had two great, two good rally games being worked on by completely separate teams, completely separate groups of people, and they weren't really, coordinated on that. Are there any stories about Revo that spring to your mind when you talk about working on that game? Anything you're particularly proud of, or thoughts about like it would have been nice if we worked on this a little bit more?
I think the original sort of idea for the game, I think we pulled that off. I think it did feel, it's just, and playing it this week, see, for this podcast, it feels great still. The game is really nice to play. It's really satisfying. The drifting's very cool and the racing's all nice and tight and stuff. So I'm very proud of the game. It was obviously very exciting to work on at the time. Being able to work on a Sega Rally game, it was awesome. But I guess, ultimately, I suppose if we'd have had more time, we could have fleshed the career mode out maybe more or something like that. But it was, or built on it with a a potential sequel one day maybe or something. It was, I think, for a first game of the studio, it was a cracking game.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. No, I was just going to say, you were saying about like a sequel and that type of thing, and I was looking at an old interview that Games Radar did with a guy himself, and he was saying that expect downloadable content, bonus cars, tracks, that sort of thing. So I take it like you guys knew you had a base to work with, and because of how well everything was structured, it would be a case of just bolting on extra content if that was going to come.
That's right, yeah, the game was built around that, adding tracks and environments, and there were a couple of environments that didn't, they either got cut or we planned them later. I can't remember, to be honest, but it's probably fine. They were in previews and stuff, so it's okay to talk about it. One was Stadium, so the tracks would be in arenas. It's kind of like with little jumps and ramps and that sort of stuff. Potentially, but they never got built. They were just a mood board basically. But one of the other environment was Coastal, where it was like a Mediterranean environment where you drive up in the mountains and come down, so like the lake or the sea. And they did get built as far as quite early ribbons. And one of those tracks got turned into Lakeside for Sega Rally 3. So you have at least seen one of the tracks.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was used for that, which is pretty cool. Yeah.
And was there,
as far as other content, yeah.
I was just going to say, in terms of like the original tracks from '95, was there ever like, I know obviously in Sega Rally 3 Desert was added, but was there ever a case that Revo would maybe get a kind of vintage championship type thing?
That's not something I recall people talking about, but I guess it's potential, especially as we had that environment built, and we could have gone back and then done Forest and the others as well. That would have been all mountain. That would have been cool. And obviously, we all wanted to have the WRC cars in, but they can't. The cost was. I think it was out of the question at the time. So we had what we had, and then Sega Rally 3, obviously, which was great. They had the WRC cars.
I mean, that's what I was going to ask. Like for Sega Rally 3, I don't think that the success of that game as an arcade title would have really hinged on the WRC license anyway. But getting it was amazing. Are you kind of privy of why? Like it was a kind of it was a desire to have that WRC license. Was it just viewed as a nice kind of boost to the title at the time?
I think it was one of those opportunities where it was like, we can get this, let's put it in, because it will be, yeah. That was the main reason, really. I think it was.
Yeah, I mean, you look at a lot of rally games from the day. Most of them did not have WRC license. The WRC license was kind of like, I mean, Evolution Studios and Sony had it for a while. And then it disappeared for a little bit, and I think it was picked up by, well, Gran Turismo 5 had it and didn't do anything with it, and then it was picked up by a bunch of those like smaller studios like your Kilotons and so I don't think it would have hinged on that, but it was definitely cool to see when you play Sega Rally 3 in the arcade. I remember the first time I did, and I was like, wow, this has the Citroen C4 and stuff like that.
Yeah. I think that was the main reason. It was just a cool thing to have, and opportunity was there, so we took it.
Going back to the way that game plays, like, yeah, you're absolutely spot on. Like, it still feels so good, and it still feels so distinctive from every other racing game, either from the time or even today. It's 30 frames, but it's very, very smooth. I was playing it on PS3 because I picked up a copy last week, and still super smooth. And that perfect, Sega arcade sort of philosophy of like it's very easy to get a car around the track. You're not fighting with the car, but it's hard to be fast. And that's something that I think is a mark of a truly great arcade racer. And you guys definitely nailed it with that.
Yeah, there's a nice lot of depth to the handling. It's cool. It's very emotional talking about this project, because obviously the tragedy of how it ended.
Right. for the moment, we're focusing on the positives. But actually, something that just came to mind. You were a level designer. How excited were you by the geodeformation tech, and how did that influence like the way in which you designed those tracks?
It was brilliant. It was really cool. It caused havoc for setting up AI, getting the cars to when you're trying to tune the AI later in the game, and the AI became unpredictable because obviously if they get knocked about by other cars on the track and you're trying to keep them to get in a certain difficulty sort of level, and then deformation added on top of that, you could never exactly tune the car to exactly how you wanted. So it was it was always sort of roughly there, which was quite frustrating towards the end when you were up against it. But it was cool. It was brilliant being able to see it all come together, and that your laps could get faster and faster per lap because obviously your grip level increased slightly, ever so slightly, as the tracks deform more. So it was clever. It was a cool piece of technology for sure.
On that note, one of my favourite things is, and it's how I've always interpreted it, maybe it's incorrect, but on one of the Arctic tracks, I think it's Arctic 2 with the lake, and because it's an icy surface underneath the snow, it's actually like the reverse of any other track in the game. So when the snow's on top of the icy lake, you've got grip, and then you get to the third lap and it's the opposite of what the first lap would be on other tracks. And it was a really cool way of reworking it. And when I was streaming Sega Rally Revo last week, it was something I talked about, and I was like, wait till you see this third lap, because it's going to be an absolute travesty. And I was just like rolling around this ice, doing awful. And yeah, it was just, it's a cool idea, because it just basically flips what you kind of understand about the tracks, because they just take that track deformation tech and use it to give you grip at the start and then take it away cruelly in that third lap.
Cool. It was trolling you the whole time. That's brilliant.
That's absolutely evil. I remember the track where I first noticed like the power of that system was Canyon 1, because you have like, you get to that like what's kind of like a riverbed almost in the canyon, and it's so wide, so you could take a million different lines through any of those corners, but then you have these puddles, and as the ruts get bigger and bigger, the puddles kind of disperse, and it's just like it gets harder to avoid them, and you obviously want to avoid them, but you also want to stay in the ruts because that's where the fastest, that's where all the grip is. So it's just like,
really cool.
Yeah, it was just, and it also just made me think, like, why haven't games tried this again? Like, why is rally titles? I think MotorStorm kind of did, but never went as far with it, if I remember correctly. But Sega Rally was just so, like, realized that potential for a system like that.
I mean, at the time, it harmed things like frame rate. Obviously, the original intention, obviously, we would have loved it to run at 60 on console, but it just wasn't possible in time. So, but I think with Sega Rally 3, the guys learned quite a lot of optimization for the deformation. So maybe if there was ever a potential sequel, that could have been brought down back to console, and we could have seen where we're at. But yeah, I guess maybe that was one of the reasons why it did hurt performance a little bit. But it is a shame, because it was a really cool idea and it worked really nicely as well.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's probably sacrilege for the people listening to the show, but I've always been of the mindset that if a game can do something really special at 30 frames per second, a racing game, that it can't do at 60, then maybe it's worth it to take the frame rate hit. And I think Sega Rally Revo definitely qualifies. I'd say the same thing about like Drive Club and its weather effects, for example.
Right, yeah.
It's yeah, I mean, it would be nice. No one would complain about, everyone would be happy about 60, but also, I mean, there's that smoothness, and like, just playing Sega Rally Revo again, and just like, I remember the first time I was floored by the motion blur. It was just so beautiful. It was a similar feeling I got when I played PGR3 for the first time.
Right, yeah.
And playing it again the other day, I was like, God, this looks like the motion blur looks so good. Like, just an amazing looking game. And it is. When, like, it's been, God, like 12, 13 years now, and when an old 3D title still looks good, like, that's an achievement, because a lot of those games don't age well.
That's right, yeah. I think the art style and quality goes a long way for doing that, and it's an absolutely cracking looking game, and the lighting, like I was saying, like the blue skies, and it's such a vivid looking, beautiful game that it has aged really well. It's brilliant.
the lighting and the art style, funnily enough, it kind of stood out to me as soon as I played it. But when you look at kind of previews and reviews from when the game first came out, there's people still referring to it as like a realistic game, and I think that's what's interesting about the art style, because it treads really nicely on that verge of being an art-driven title, but also taking kind of cues from real life. And even it's why Alpine's my favourite location of the bunch, because playing it, like I've been playing it recently on my TV at 4K 60 FPS, and you're still seeing a game that perhaps looks a lot better than some of the stuff we see now, because there's kind of the liberties taken in the art style really benefit the overall experience instead of this hyper realistic look, and I think that's why it's aged so well. And I will say, I know we talked about 2006 earlier. I'm not a fan of that game personally. I do prefer Revo a lot, purely for one of those reasons again. I feel as if 2006 could have been any game, really, if you kind of took away the Sega Rally branding, whereas Revo has that nice arcade look to it.
Yeah, I guess one of the other things is we don't get games like that anymore. There's no new Ridge Racer to have a similar sort of look, so you just don't see it anymore. Everything's all very realistic and gritty. So when you see something pretty and vivid, it's quite surprising. Like I've noticed it myself actually recently playing Burnout Paradise, the remaster on PS4, and it's like this game looks absolutely stunning still, because it's the same thing. It looks so bright and sharp and happy and colourful, and it's so different to most modern racing games.
Yeah, I mean, Revo really was at the time kind of like the anti-racing games, because you had that mid to late 2000s like kind of gritty sepia filter that a lot of games were using. I mean, as much as I love Grid was kind of the one that started it for racing games. But you had it in all kinds of games. I mean, where it was Gears of War, or like, what have you. Sega Rally Revo was like taking like taking the lens off and cleaning it and putting it back on. Like, it was just like refreshing to see. Like, it was just wow. I didn't realize like games could still be this bright and happy, and as you say, colorful, and look this good. Yeah, I mean, I guess now we can transition into, the game releases. Sega Rally Revo, fall 2007. I remember it was in North America, at least, it was like right next to PGR4. So I got both of those games in like the same week, and that was really cool. Critically, it did pretty well. I was looking. I mean, there were people like kind of knocking it because that's something that everyone did back then, about like, there isn't like a cosmetic damage model or whatever. But like, which we're very outspoken about how that is a bad opinion and people shouldn't. And it must be so freaking annoying, because like no one cares about that anymore. Like people are over it now. Caring about damage models.
Yeah. That for many years, didn't it, before they finally put it in, and yeah. So, I mean, it did well, but unfortunately, it just, I guess the sales weren't there, it didn't do as well commercially. Yeah, I guess going back to, Brendan mentioned DLC and other projects, did you quickly see like you had these plans maybe lined up for things you wanted to work on, and then slowly they were scaled back until it all just kind of came crashing down? So obviously after, I can't remember, there was a little bit of a crossover between finishing Revo and Sega Rally 3 development, where people would move on to Sega Rally 3, and so quite a few people working on that, and then there's a few other people working on ideas for what we could do potentially next. And after Sega Rally 3 finished, well, I think actually some people, after the studio closed, I think a few people still worked on Sega Rally 3 just to finish things up. But anyway, before we did close, we were trying to get projects off the ground, and ultimately, nothing quite came together. So unfortunately, yes, we did close, but we did try hard for a number of months, doing prototypes, actually getting prototypes up and running of potential ideas. And unfortunately, it's not anything I can talk about really, of course. But so it was really sad, obviously, because a lot of people there really loved working for Sega, and the game was obviously cool. And I think ultimately, I guess it didn't sound quite as well as they'd hoped. It was just a shame. We didn't get a chance to sort of make a second game or a second project to try and make improvements. But yeah.
So I mean, on that regard, then, obviously you can't speak about specifics or anything like that. We understand that. You were saying there, kind of, if you made a second game, maybe some things you would change, or another game just as Sega Racing Studio. Was the likelihood that it'd be another Sega Rally game, or at that point was there kind of enough wheels in motion that it would have been another series? Obviously, you don't have to say specifics, but I'm just curious if the intention was to make a sequel after Revo and Sega Rally 3, or like there was other kind of Sega franchises at the time that were on the table.
Actually, both. There was talk of talking about a sequel, or at least what we could do with a sequel and how we could sort of make improvements, looking at all the feedback from the game and obviously stuff we wanted to do ourselves, expanding the career mode perhaps and all that sort of stuff. We were looking at an existing Sega IP to sort of make a change to that as well, make a new game. But you
don't have to respond to this, Paul, but given the Sega IP that would be racing IP that would be revived, a bunch of years later, I think I can assume what that was. But anyway, that's really, God. I mean, I think everyone who was around at the time and could see what was going on, it was so heartbreaking to go from the high of like, wow, like Sega Racing is back to, and that's it. And it's I unfortunately have to draw a lot of parallels between like what happened with the Evolution team when it went to Codemasters and kind of the way that fell apart. It's just like you see it so much in this industry where like there are great ideas, new teams started, new projects started, and then the first project doesn't do well, and then those teams get dispersed and disbanded. I mean, I guess the silver lining to this was you ended up back at Codemasters, right? And Codemasters purchased that team, or what was left of it?
That's right. Yeah, they bought the studio, the team, the studio. Yeah, and quite a few people stayed on. I seem to remember, and that was and they were then split between, because at the time Codemasters were looking to make the F1 game. They got the license for that, so they needed the team to build that on that. So they were like, "This is perfect." So a few people moved on to that. And a few people, including myself, moved on to Dirt because Grid 1 had just shipped, I think it was Grid 1 had just shipped. I can't remember the time. Was it Grid 2? Or maybe, no, I think it was the first one. So then we were then working on Dirt 2. So a few people moved on to that. And I think a few people also went on to Flashpoint, which was the first-person shooter project that they were working on at the time as well.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, so, Yeah, I think you could choose what team you wanted to work on. I think, and my preference was obviously go back onto Dirt because that's what I knew. So it was cool. Yeah, it was.
Was there anything that you like, you or anyone you were working with took with you, like having worked in the Sega Rally project, and like, oh, this was cool. Like, let's see if we can kind of take the learnings or whatever that from that game and apply it to Dirt. Because I think to me, Dirt 1 was visually striking, but for some reason I think the handling model didn't click with me. And then 2 was where, and there were some changes to the design as far as like there was a lot of Europeans especially have an issue with like all the Americanized content in Dirt 2, but I think Dirt 2 was where the series became really fun for me, because like some of those stages, I mean, like I think it was Morocco, oh my god, like a fantastic rally in that game. I don't know. Is there anything that like you kind of carried with you to that project?
I don't think so, because that game was already sort of starting up and they knew what they wanted to make with it. So they just had a great design team for making that. The car handling team and the design team itself was they knew what they wanted to do, and so not really, no, not from memory anyway, at least.
It's cool you were a lot of you were able to kind of like, you know, land on your feet. And I mean, it did kind of create an interesting situation with Sega Rally Online Arcade, because God, I can't exactly. I think that game came out in like 2009 or something. It was quite late, right? Out of nowhere
as well. It was just it was weird. So that's actually one of the suggestions a few of us made back at the Racing Studio. It was like, why don't we put this game out on PSN? Because I think at the time the 360 was still limited to size or whatever. I can't quite remember, but it was like, let's put it on PS3.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's what it was, wasn't it? Yeah. Let's get out there and see. And obviously it never happened, but yeah, to see the arcade game, it was really weird. Yeah, I think Sumo made that, didn't they? Did they?
Yeah, they did.
I can't remember.
Sumo.
Yeah. Handled Outrun Online Arcade as well.
The size limit is exactly true, because I remember to hit it, there was a point during the 360's lifespan where it had to be under a certain size. It was like 500 megabytes or something, or 250 megabytes or something crazy like that. And to make Outrun fit, that's why when you play that game, it's very weird because it's all in HD, but the menus and the HUD are all in like standard def 480p, so it looks really strange. Yeah, and then with Online Arcade, I think by that point the restriction was lifted. Microsoft could kind of see where the industry was going, but just Sumo working on that game afterwards. I mean, I obviously you weren't there, nothing you could speak of, but I do find it interesting that like they didn't, as Brendan has talked about before, just like Sega Rally Revo really seemed to be tuned to the console, like the physics and everything was tuned to controller. It was really good. Kind of shocking they took the approach of porting Sega Rally 3 to console rather than making a streamlined version with less tracks and cars of Sega Rally Revo. Kind of a curious decision.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's cool. It's good to see though, but it was weird because it didn't have the WRC cards either, did it? They were gone. Is that right?
No.
Yeah, they were gone.
Yeah, it didn't have the license.
Yeah. So
the only thing I like about Online Arcade is that you did have that Desert 95 track. That's the only thing that you really missed in Revo, but otherwise Revo's better in pretty much every way. I mean, it has more content, it has more tracks. It doesn't exactly have like the arcade tracks, but it has all the tracks that inspired the arcade tracks, so in a way it kind of does, you know.
Yeah.
Obviously, the vision for Sega Rally 3 would have been different than Revo, and in trying to make 3, was it to try and emulate the gameplay of 95 and 2, or was it more just we've got this kind of the way we've made Revo is for that depth and maybe kind of to inspire people to play it more on console when they've got constant access, whereas like 3 obviously has been played in an arcade environment. What game would you say probably had the most influence, would you say, from your perspective in terms of like the handling and the gameplay?
For Sega Rally 3, it definitely would have been Revo. I think they were like, let's just take what we've got and make a cut down version of that game and put it out in the arcades. And
it was good that the arcade version existed because, you know, come the mid to late 2000s, you know, the arcades were not a factor anymore in the West. So you could never lead with an arcade game. You know, you could never really argue. I mean, you look at Daytona Championship USA, it's literally Daytona 1 with a kind of new graphics filter on top of it. So you really can't invest in it. But to take Revo, to take the backwards approach of taking Revo and then apply it to arcades was pretty cool. And that game was, I think by the time the news came out about Sega Rally 3, it was very late and maybe like right before it started like shipping to operators and stuff like that. Like it was, I'm kind of amazed it was able to be kept as a secret for so long.
Yeah, it probably wouldn't be these days, right? But it was cool. I guess it gave people access to this game that maybe didn't have a PS3 or 360 at the time. Then, would then potentially go and buy that console version of the game.
So you've said Sega Rally Revo is a project that like you really look back on really fondly, and I mean you've had the privilege to work on a lot of really great racing IP. Are there any that you were like, damn, I really wish, like we asked Paul Raczynski this question, and he said Ridge Racer, and I feel like your answer is probably similar.
to a dream game to work on, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it'd be Ridge Racer, definitely. I mean, yeah, it's the one, right? It's the one that needs to come back the most, and yeah, it feels like that project needs a lot of love these days. It's kind of been left dormant by Namco, because you've got Ace Combat and Tekken, but Ridge Racer's just sitting there, and yeah, it's a real shame. That'd be cool.
I'm a little bit offended that like they. I mean, I'm happy. I'm not really offended. It's just like that they brought back Ace Combat, but then bring back Ridge Racer, because like, and I mean they still might. I played a little. I was never really an Ace Combat guy. I was never really a airplane dog fighting kind of. Yeah, I never really got into those games. It's great for people who have been waiting for it, but at the same time, I was like, I feel like you can make more of a. You can't really make a mainstream argument for either game, but you can make more of one for Ridge Racer, because it's just a straight up racing game. It's easier to play. It's easier to just dive into. Yeah, I really hope that they return to that, and if they do, that they put together a team of people who, because there are so many people who want to see it made, and a lot of those people are working in the industry right now.
Ultimately, just Namco see it from a business point of view, and it's not viable. I don't know. It's odd, because there was a Vita version, wasn't there? And then there was Unbounded on PS3, which I didn't like. I don't know what you guys felt about that one, but
yeah, not a fan.
We've never talked about that. I've never played Unbounded. As soon as I saw that game existed, I was like, nope, not gonna even bother.
Yeah, I think there's a demo out for it if it's still available to play. But yeah, it's an interesting take on the. Of Ridge Racer, that's for sure.
I mean, I'm sure it's fine. I think it just it just felt kind of like a slap to the face to actual Ridge Racer fans. Like if they called it anything else, if they called it, I don't know, if they tried to pitch it as more of like a split-second type game and didn't really call it Ridge Racer something, then it probably would have gotten on better. But it was just this weird thing to try and leverage the brand, but in a way that really didn't feel right. That felt a little bit disingenuous. It was cool though that it did get some old Ridge Racer content. You had the Assoluto Basante and the car from the first game, the FA Racing. Cool. So that was kind of neat.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting. But yeah, I played it and I wasn't really a fan of it, so I didn't buy it. So yeah.
Would you consider yourself more of like a Ridge Racer guy or like a Sega Racing, Sega Rally guy?
Probably Ridge Racer is the one.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember just playing it in the arcades was phenomenal, and then when it came home on PlayStation, the original PlayStation was just ridiculous, wasn't it? To have this arcade, very high quality port, generally speaking, of the arcade game in the home was amazing. And obviously, then they went on and made lots of very good sequels, and for a number of years. So yeah, it was cool. But yeah, I love Sega Rally 2 very much.
It's hard to choose. It really is. But I saw. I was looking at the Discord, and I saw your icon is the one car from Ridge Racer, the Rukyu, or I can never pronounce that car's name, so I don't even know how.
Yeah, that was from GT Sport. So I've got my Ridge Racer livery in Gran Turismo Sport, and it's
that's awesome. GT Sport's great because there are so many people who have made those liveries, whether it's from Ridge Racer or the Hornet from Daytona. Really great to see. Yeah,
it's cool. Yeah, and all the classic WRC. The Lancia one, the Integrale with a classic WRC, the Martini livery on it and stuff. It's wicked.
Yeah. I'm so jealous of you. You actually drove that car.
I didn't drive the Lancia. I was a kid when he had it. I was.
Okay.
Yeah, I was a child when he had the car. Yeah, I would love to drive a Lancia, but no, it was many years ago when I was a little boy. But I do remember it vividly. It was cool.
I mean, even just to sit in the Lancia would be nice.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
As it was moving. My friend and I, we recently discovered that there are a couple shops, we're in the Northeast in the U.S., there are a couple shops around like Virginia and Pennsylvania that specialize in Japanese imports. And I mean, these things have always existed, but we never really bothered to look. And it's like, the prices are actually really, really compelling. Like, I could get a Toyota Celica GT4 SC205 with relatively low mileage for like $19,000 or $18,000. Like, yeah, why would I buy any new car when that option is apparently available to me?
That's cool.
But anyway, kind of going off on tangents. Yeah, I mean, that was pretty much all the stuff that I wanted to focus on. You know, you've shed so much light on Sega Rally Revo, and it's you know, really great to hear it, you know, from someone who actually worked on the game and has so much love for all these series. Brendan, I don't want to cut you off. Is there anything that is going through your mind right now?
No, I think we've kind of covered the main interesting points about the short-lived Sega Racing Studio and how much like Revo stands the test of time, because it's been like a bit of a bug almost since Time Extend started, where get mentioned in passing, and then obviously once I realised I could kind of go off and off about it, Adam started to get bored, and he's like, right, okay, we'll have a look at it again, and we can see what's there. And then since we started the Discord as well, that's inspired people to kind of whip it out again, and there's even conversations about getting a lobby going to play it again, and it's just good to see it kind of getting the recognition it deserves, because it's a hill I willingly die on, to be honest. In terms of like modern racers, if it's Sega Rally Revo, Blur, or to a slightly lesser extent Split Second, those three are like the ones I feel as if we're kind of unfairly forgotten about in many ways, and that's why we talk about them so much. And one thing that is really interesting is how, like, Blur and Split Second, for example, because they are quite a bit newer as well, when we did this controversial tweet thing, they're getting so many mentions, but surprisingly not as much for Revo. But like, in terms of the Time Extend community itself, I think pretty much everybody that's talking about it has played it in some capacity, and I guess as a games designer and developer, that's all you can really ask for, that the kind of hardcore community embrace the game. And yeah, I mean, the intention last week was a half-an-hour stream to play some Revo and just revisit it, and then 2 hours 20 minutes later I was like, fucking hell, I love this game.
It's cool, and it's really nice seeing people talk about it and stuff, you know. It's all these years later, because it's a long time ago now. You forget that it was 2007. Here we are 13 years later, you know. It's crazy. It's cool, you know. Yeah, it's great. It's good. And Split Second, it was cool. I really enjoyed that. A friend of mine worked on that game actually, who I worked at later on in after Sony. He worked on Split Second, and he felt the same way as Revo. You know, it was they were taken too soon, you know, to make another game or do something different. And because they worked on Pure before that. Did you ever play that?
I really like Pure.
That was fantastic. Yeah, so yeah,
I think
the racing game
Studios
community
in general were a really good team.
Well, yeah, that's right. Yeah, they came up with some really cool stuff, and the racing game industry just kind of really got hit hard in the UK, didn't it? So it's a real shame those few games, Bizarre Creations as well, obviously.
Yeah, but I mean, you guys are keeping it alive now. Like, it's you know, it's Codemasters, it's Playground working on Forza Horizon.
Right.
Like you. If it really wasn't for UK developers, there would be no good, at least arcade racers anymore. So, thank you for fighting the good fight. And I have to give a thank you to you and the community as well, because like Sega Rally Revo is a game I played a lot at the time. I liked it, but for whatever reason, I think I just had some expectations about what I wanted from the series, and like when I was younger, I was like, I don't know. But just like revisiting it in, you know, last week, and then also hearing Brendan's enthusiasm about it since we started this podcast really made me go back and look at it with fresh eyes and be like, no, this is why this game's actually brilliant. And and it's so great to be able to do that, and to be able to have like a community to like talk some sense into us every now and then, which is just pretty great. But yeah, I'm really stoked to get like that lobby going, because it'd be a lot of fun, and I'm amazed it's still up. I guess all the old lobbies on the 360 on Xbox Live are gone, but I guess just the way the PS3 is set up, they can continue.
Yeah, I mean, let's get it done before PS5's out, because maybe they'll start turning off old lobbies. Who knows?
Well, no, the PS5, I mean, maybe, but then again, the PS5 is supposed to be backwards compatible with every PlayStation, I think.
Right, yeah.
That's what we've heard, so. Yeah, and I also have to say before we close out that like I kind of feel bad because we focus a lot on Sega Rally. We didn't really get to plug the stuff you're working on now, but like the F1 franchise I think is secretly like consistently the best racing game this generation. Just like 2018 was what I played the most of. I didn't get 2019, but 2018 is just like there's like nothing I could ask for that I want in that game that I didn't have. Like it was perfect.
Cool. That's really nice to hear. That's cool. Yeah, we making big strides now. They moved to a 2-team system for that game, so we've got one team working on 1 year, whilst another team's working on it. So we can basically spend 2 years on a project instead of one. So, and 19 was the first year we did that. You can see that the big changes we made this year to the project. It's really paid off for us. It's cool.
Yeah, I mean, keep up the good work. Excited to see what happens next. I tend with the annual sports franchises. Like I feel like it's hard for me to get everyone every year, but I might feel like 2020 I might return because I haven't played an F1 game in a couple of years now. So, cool. yeah, keep it up. What's a good place if people want to find you online? See what your controversial racing game takes are.
I've not done one yet. Actually, no, I did. Mine was F-Zero versus Wipeout, and
Say it for your shame, Paul. What's your favourite?
It's F-Zero.
Wow, you're going against your countrymen. I don't know if you can legally be a citizen anymore if you prefer F-Zero to Wipeout.
And that's it. Also massively overdue a sequel, right? I mean, the GameCube one. A very, very long time ago. So maybe one day.
Right. No, I mean, if I start talking now about how GX is like the best racing game Nintendo ever made, and Nintendo can't make a good racing game, the show would never end. So we're gonna save everyone that discomfort, and we're gonna close it out here. Is there a place that you want to share? If people can find you on Twitter or something like that, or anything
sure.
To look out for?
My Twitter handle is DC Arena, and come and follow us up and. Maybe I'll say something about F-Zero. Who knows?
Very cool. Very, very cool. Well, thank you again, Paul, so much. This was a great time. We will see you all, listeners. We'll see you all again very soon and probably talk about some spicy game takes. So look out for that.
Yeah. Thank you very much.